Welcome to the Teaching Church. We are about to embark in a journey through the book of Revelation, okay? And my last video was the introduction to the book of Revelation. And I took you through some Bible history to get us up to the book of Revelation. And in that video, I briefly covered something that was called Daniel's 70th week. And I thought to myself, I better cover that in a little more depth. So when we get to the book of Revelation, you're going to be able to understand that a little more easily, okay? Daniel's prophecy is one of the most important, and we should understand it. But if you haven't watched my last video, please watch that one first before you watch this one. Back in the Old Testament, God gave Israel a commandment that every seventh sabbatical year, they are to give the land rest, okay? Well, Israel disobeyed. They didn't listen to God. They did it 70 times, okay? They did not give the land rest, which totaled 490 years. So God punished them. He placed them into captivity for 7 years. While in captivity, there was an Old Testament prophet named Daniel. He was reading the scrolls of another Old Testament prophet named Jeremiah before him. And while Daniel was reading the scrolls, he discovered that, hey, these 70 years of captivity are almost done. They're almost complete. What's next? So God suddenly sends Daniel an angel, Gabriel. And Gabriel is going to give Daniel a prophecy of what's next and what's to come in the future. But he is told that you're not going to understand all this, but I want you to write it down and I want you to seal it up till the end. Daniel is told that this prophecy is a 70-week prophecy, which is confusing because it actually lasts 490 years. You have to remember that in this prophecy, 1 week equals 7 years. We have to read and understand this prophecy in weeks and years. We come to this, remember, we just covered it. Israel disobeyed God 70 times, 70 sabbatical years, which equals 490, okay? Daniel is now told when this prophecy can start, okay? When can we start counting this prophecy? This commandment starts when a man named Artaxerxes, he lets the Jews go back and rebuild Jerusalem. And this commandment was given in 454 BC, okay? Now, Daniel takes this prophecy and he breaks it down into 3 parts. The first part is 7 weeks, 49 years. Remember, 1 week is 7 years. 7 times 7 is 49. And at the end of this part 1, Jerusalem is going to be restored. Part 1. Remember, 7 weeks. 1 week equals 7 years. 7 times 7 is 49. So now if we take this 49 years and we subtract it from the 454 when the commandment went forth to restore Jerusalem, we come to 405 BC. Well, what happened at 405 BC? Jerusalem was restored. Okay? Prophecy fulfilled, part 1 of Daniel's 70th week. Now, part 2 of the prophecy says the Messiah will be cut off, meaning Jesus will be crucified. Part 2 is 62 weeks, which equals 434 years. Remember, 1 week is 7 years. 7 times 62 is 434. So let's combine the first part and the second part. Remember, 7 weeks. The second part, 62 weeks, which is 69. We're in the 69th week. 49 years and 434 years is 483 years. So if we take that 483 with the combination of part 1 and part 2 and subtract it from the going forth of the commandment, which is 454, that brings us to 0, and then it starts to bring us to AD. Well, that brings us to 29 AD. Well, what happened in 29 AD? Jesus was crucified, okay? So that is part 1 fulfilled and part 2 fulfilled. Okay, so now we have 1 week or 7 years left. So if we would add that last part 3, the 7 years, onto the 29 where we left off, it brings us to 36 AD. Well, nothing happened in 36 AD. The Bible tells us in this prophecy of Daniel This prophecy cannot be fulfilled until a list is fulfilled. And that list for Israel, which must be completed, is finish transgressions, make an end to sin, make reconciliation for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision, and anoint the most holy. Well, did any of that happen, or has any of that happened? Well, no. We know the answer is no. And because of this list hasn't been fulfilled yet, the prophecy cannot be fulfilled yet. Israel's prophetic program has been put on hold, okay? God has made a plan to save the Gentiles, just like he told us in the book of Isaiah. He always had a plan for salvation for the Gentiles. Israel's temporary rejection of their Messiah has now started a new program. What is this new program? Well, prophecy is ended at part 2. We're in a new program. This program we're in between part 2 and the start of part 3. It's called the body of Christ. The mystery of the revelation, the church age, Paul's ministry. Paul is our apostle. He is the apostle to the Gentiles. Jesus gave Paul all the theology, all the doctrine to write in his letters for us today during this program of the body of Christ. So we are in a gap period here between part 2 and part 3. Part 1 has been fulfilled. Part 2 has been fulfilled. We are now in this gap body of Christ program, saving Gentiles. And so now, how is God going to end this program? Well, he ends it with the rapture of the church. He takes us out of the way, out of the picture, to start part 3 of Daniel's 70th week. God starts back up Israel's prophetic program. And he starts back up with Daniel's 70th week, the 490 years. At the end of part 3, Daniel's 70th week, we call it the tribulation, which is the book of Revelation, which we're going to, prophecy fulfilled. So if you take part 3, there's 1 week left. If you add it on to the 69th where we left off, that's 70 weeks, which the last of part 3 is 7 years. You add that on to the 483 where we left off, it's 490 years. Prophecy fulfilled at the end of part 3. Okay? Exactly how Daniel's 70th week prophecy unfolded. That's exactly what the Bible tells us happened, and that is exactly what did happen. So now remember, when we get to the book of Revelation, this is a book of prophecy. It is Israel's book. This is not the church's book. It has nothing to do with the church. We have already been taken out. God is taking Israel through some horrible times through the 7-year tribulation, Daniel's 70th week, because he wants to show them what they missed here in 29 AD, that Jesus is their Messiah. God brings them through this horrible time, and he is preparing them to meet their Messiah, their King Jesus, to bring in his kingdom for the Jewish people here on earth. So the next video, I hope all these the last video and this video helps, and we're going to start the book of Revelation. See you then.